What's up, all my movie-loving maniacs? This is your boy Bankful B of the Lassiter Factor, and I am back with my monthly deep dive of Spider-Man in cinema, and I'm ending this month talking about the two Mark Webb movies that stars Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I already talked about the Sam Raimi trilogy, so I'm going straight to the Andrew Garfield films, and so next year it'll only be one movie a month. So let's get into it. Now, as I said before, I've talked about Spider-Man movies quite extensively, whether that be on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, you name it. So I'm not going to rehash anything I'd said in those reviews. I'm just going to basically share my experience with these films, how I feel about them, how I feel about them, well, how I felt about them, and how I feel about them now, and just their overall legacy and impact. Now, of course, the Sam Raimi trilogy with Tobey Maguire will always have a special place in my heart, particularly those first two films. But when these films came out, I was willing to give them a chance, but I was still lukewarm to them a bit. And yes, it probably could have been nostalgia. And yes, like I said, I hold the Tobey Maguire movies near and dear to my heart. So it was just kind of hard for me to just accept these movies for what they are. I mean, I accept them, but at the same time, it's just like nothing's ever going to make me forget the Tobey Maguire movies. And so after the failures of Spider-Man 3, that's when Sony just decided to reboot the series, and that's how we got The Amazing Spider-Man, the first film. And I remember this movie came out the same year as the first Avengers and The Dark Knight Rises, and then here we go with The Amazing Spider-Man. I'm like, this is a new take, and it was a little darker, it was more grittier, and it was going to tell the same story over again, but with some new twists and turns. It was going to dive a little deeper into the parents of Peter Parker. Now, I liked that first Amazing Spider-Man movie, but didn't quite love it. But watching with adult eyes, I can still appreciate it for what it is and just it being a different take from the other Spider-Man movies. But these movies as a whole, I do think they succeed in a number of ways, but I think they also trip on themselves in a number of ways. But when I watch the Sam Raimi films, I can look at those movies and think like this is one man's vision. Where I look at these movies, and while Mark Webb, he did have a hand in these two movies, but at the same time, I still couldn't help but feel like these movies were essentially made just so Sony can retain the rights to Spider-Man, and so that they can, after the success of the first Avengers, they wanted to build their own universe using Spider-Man characters, which clearly didn't work out. I mean, they still tried it, and it still failed. As for Andrew Garfield as the title character, look, I've always said I think Tobey Maguire played the best Peter Parker. I think Andrew Garfield played the best Spider-Man, and I think Tom Holland did a good job at both. But with Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, I think he was excellent. But as Peter Parker, I mean, for me, and maybe it's just me, I know a lot of people like this take, and I understand, like, this is a new take of Peter Parker. So this movie came out in 2012, so what was considered nerd in 2012 wasn't considered nerd 10 years prior to that. So it was a modern take of Peter Parker. But for me personally, it just didn't quite work for me. Like, to me, Andrew Garfield, bless him, and I know before he made this film, he expressed how much this character means to him. But just because you have a lot of reverence for the character doesn't mean you're quite fit for the character. I'm sorry, but for me, Andrew Garfield, he was just too cool to be Peter Parker. He was just too good looking. All right, I'm sorry. That being said, I do appreciate his take on Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And I do like his journey of just searching for a father figure and looking for answers for his parents. And then at first when he becomes Spider-Man, he's just doing it for the wrong reasons. But then once he saved that kid from the bridge, to me, that's when he truly became Spider-Man. And he has his moments as Spider-Man. And I do think that his version of Spider-Man is just a more accurate representation of what we see Spider-Man in the comics. He's more skinny, he's lengthy, and he's cracking jokes, which I know fans appreciated. I do think they kind of drag his origin story just a little bit in this movie, but then once it really gets going, especially with all the lizard stuff, that's when I was really locked in. I do love Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy. Now, granted, nothing's ever going to make me forget Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane, but I do think Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy was a bit of an upgrade. She just has more agency than Mary Jane did. And she has great chemistry with Andrew Garfield, but that's due to the fact that the two of them were actually dating at the time when they were making these movies. So their chemistry, it just worked because it came from a real place. While nothing is ever going to make me forget Cliff Robertson and Rosemary Harris as Uncle Ben and Aunt May, I do like Martin Sheen and Sally Field's interpretation of Uncle Ben and Aunt May, because they still feel like those characters, and quite frankly, they actually do feel like parental figures within Peter's life, and they're actually trying to instill good values into him. Basically, I feel like this is an actual married couple that I would see somewhere on the street. As for Reese Ifans as Dr. Connors, aka the Lizard, which I know they were trying to do in the Sam Raimi movies, but they finally got to do it here. When he's as Kurt Connors, I understood his plight. Now, as the Lizard, I know some people had some issues with it, and the CGI is a bit spotty now, but even back then it was a little spotty, and there was a bunch of deleted scenes that just would have made his arc just a little bit more better if they have kept those deleted scenes in the movies. But regardless, I did like at the time that we finally got to see the Lizard, and he does look pretty cool. Now, that second movie, Amazing Spider-Man 2, which came out in 2014, oh boy, that's when things really went wrong. I mean, we were only 2 movies deep, and they made the same mistakes that they made in Spider-Man 3, and somehow worse. I mean, it was too many villains, it was too convoluted. Now, they did maintain the relationship between Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and Gwen Stacy, and that tragic end for Gwen Stacy, moment of silence. But everything with Peter Parker's parents in this movie really just amounted to nothing, just information that we already knew from the beginning. Oscorp, bad. The movie was also tonally inconsistent. Like I said, they made all the same mistakes in this movie that they made with Spider-Man 3. It was Sony trying to build a universe. They added too many villains. Sony just got their little greedy hands into it. And again, Mark Webb, God bless him, he tried, but Sony ultimately turned this movie into something it really shouldn't have been. But regardless, I still enjoyed this movie for what it was, and it still does have its moments. Like everything between Peter Parker and Harry Osborn, who in this continuity is played by Dane DeHaan. And even though their friendship is introduced in this movie and not alluded to in the first movie, I do like the little work they do to introduce it, like, okay, these are old friends. When he becomes the Green Goblin, nothing is ever going to touch Willem Dafoe and the way he just abruptly became the Green Goblin because he had some family disease that was hereditary and it was affecting him and it was killing him faster than it was killing his own father, Norman Osborn. It's just this whole arc was just rushed just so that they can get this character to kill Gwen Stacy. I do like Jamie Foxx as Electro in this movie, and of course I liked him even more in No Way Home, but I don't think his portrayal as the character wasn't as bad as everyone makes him out to be, and he does have some of my favorite lines. "It's my birthday. Now it's time for me to light my candles." But before he becomes Electro, he is just Shrek, and need I say more? This is giving Edward Nygma from Batman Forever. Paul Giamatti as the Rhino in a mech Rhino suit. Honestly, I feel like this just could have worked, but the way they did it in the movie... Okay, for some more positives, I do like the music in this movie. I know the first movie was the music in that movie was composed by James Horner, rest in peace, but in this movie, it was produced by Hans Zimmer, who, even if he's composed a movie for a bad comic book movie, i.e. Dark Phoenix, he was never the weak part of that movie, and I feel that is apparent here. And Hans Zimmer wasn't the only one that made the music for this film. He collaborated with other people like Junkie XCL and Pharrell Williams. I do like how there's an emphasis on dubstep music in this movie, given how there's an electric type character. Did I mention Mary Jane was supposed to be in this movie and supposed to be played by Shailene Woodley? Oh, y'all don't remember that, do you? Another element that could have stayed in the movie. Look, in the end, I do think these 2 movies are a mixed bag, but I do like the first movie more than I like the second one, and often I go back and forth with which one I dislike more, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 3, and honestly, it's Spider-Man 2 for me as the worst one. But again, I still enjoy The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but that's just where my head is at with it. Ultimately, I look at Andrew Garfield in this movie the same way I look at Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill. They did a good job at those characters, but they just had the misfortune of being in bad movies. But if there is an Amazing Spider-Man 3 on the way, I wouldn't mind, just so that Andrew Garfield could get the opportunity to basically finish this off or continue on, because he definitely got dealt a bad hand with these movies. And Andrew Garfield, he was just playing the cards that he was dealt. I'm going to give the first Amazing Spider-Man the thumbs up emoji, and the Amazing Spider-Man 2 a mid shoulder shrug emoji. But that's it for today. Thank y'all so much for watching. Be on the lookout for my review of Captain America Civil War, which is the debut of Tom Holland Spider-Man. This your boy Bankful B of the Lassiter Factor. Stay safe, wash your hands, peace.